This video will show how to restore a Hammond Art Deco calendar clock. They're also known as Gregory calendar desk clocks. Built in the 1930s to 40s, 80 to 90 years old. This clock doesn't run. Before attempting to restore it, you need to make sure that the coil on the inside is intact and that you have continuity. To do that, you need an ohm meter. And what you have to do is flip it on and just touch the leads to the electric plug. And you can see by the numbers flashing that we have continuity, so this clock is restorable. One thing I recommend doing is to take a photo of every step of the way so that when you put the clock back together, you'll know what it's supposed to look like. Turning the clock over, you see the data plate, a start knob, and a set knob. The first step is to remove the set knob. It's on very tight. You need to grip the stem with a vice grip, and then with a pair of pliers, unscrew the set knob. Next, remove the 4 screws from the back of the case. The screws are removed, and the next thing is to turn the clock over and remove the case. Put that aside. Now, remove the glass plate and turn the clock back over. Now remove the hex nuts that hold the data plate to the back of the clock. And remove the data plate along with the back. When you open a lot of these clocks, you'll see that the cord is connected to the clock using wire nuts. Whether they were manufactured that way or they're present because the cord has been replaced at some point, I don't know, but these are going to have to be cut away. So I'll do that and then we'll come back. I've removed the tape from the wires and separated the 2 of them. And now we put aside the back plate with the rest of the electric cord. And next we have to remove the rotor. So we undo the 2 hex nuts. Lift out the rotor, and you'll find a gasket here, and it tends to be soaked with oil that has leaked out of the rotor over all these years. Just remove this and set it aside. Next, we remove the clock hands. We start with the second hand, which is a friction grip. It's very snug and it tends to be very difficult to remove, and they're very fragile. Rather than force it, I have some WD-40 that I sprayed into a cap, and I just put a little bit in the center of it, and I will let that penetrate for at least a few hours. In the meantime, we can work on opening up the rotor and cleaning and lubricating it. The rotor is sealed with a metal plug covered in solder. That needs to be removed so that we can drain the old oil. I will place the rotor in a clamp for this as it gets too hot to handle. What you need for this is a soldering gun. It takes a bit of time. I'll start it, but I'll end up showing the finished product. You just want to melt, have the solder just drip away from the plug. don't know if you can see it or not, but the plug is right there. Once you've removed all the solder, it's pretty simple to pry out the plug with a small screwdriver. It looks like this. There's the hole and the plug. Now we have to fill this rotor with a penetrating oil. I use liquid wrench, and you can get these small dispenser bottles on eBay. They're just a few dollars. And the first step is to fill the rotor halfway with the liquid wrench. Give it a good shake, and this will start to dissolve the oil that's inside. And then fill it the rest of the way. Once it's full, give it another shake, and you can spin the output gear a little bit to free it up. And now it has to sit for 24 hours. Now we can remove the hands. We start with the second hand. When the clock is sitting on its back, it presses in the start knob, which prevents the second hand from turning. We now take a needle nose plier and gently rotate it until it begins to get loose. And then once it's loose, pry it up with a small screwdriver. And there you go. Next we have to remove the minute hand, but there's a nut holding that down. That too needs to be treated with some WD-40. So we put a little bit on here. And we can let this sit for an hour or two as well. Now we can remove the minute and hour hands. The little nut should be easy to turn now. Once it's off, just try to pry the hands up gently with a small screwdriver. Comes off. And now the hour hand. The next step is to remove the faceplate. There are little bent metal tabs at the corners. These have to be pried off and it will come off. It takes some time, so I'll do that and then we'll come back to it. I've bent all 4 tabs, and when you flip it over, the face comes off quite easily. Put that on the side. The next step is we have to remove the front plate from the back of the clock by unscrewing these 4 nuts. One. 2. 3. At this point, you have to be very careful when you lift this plate off, because all the gears in here will come loose, and if you don't see the position they're in, it'll be very difficult to get it back into the same position. Now you can remove the plate. In doing so, some of the gears may shift, but I will reposition them so you can see how they're supposed to look. Okay, the plate is off, and they pretty much haven't moved. This is the proper alignment of how the gears look. And the first thing we do is there's a small spring which is attached to the starter knob. You have to remove that, put it aside, you don't want to lose that. Next we will remove the gears one by one. And now is the time to take a photo of each step so you see how each gear looks. Here's one. This is two gears that are stuck together. They separate. Third one. And the fourth. The next step is to clean the gears. You can use some warm soapy water, and a toothbrush works really well because there's a lot of dried gunky oil stuck in all the teeth of the gears. So I'm going to clean everything up, and then we'll get back to cleaning out the rotor. The liquid wrench has been loosening up the old oil in the rotor for 24 hours, and you can see what has leaked out is that old green oil. Now we have to shake out as much of the liquid wrench as we possibly can, and just start shaking it out. You can see how the green is the old oil that was originally in the rotor. This will take a while to get all of it out. I'll complete it and then we'll come back because it does take a while. All of the liquid wrench has been removed from the rotor. Now we're going to fill it up this time with 3-in-1 oil. I'm going to fill it all the way. Give it a shake halfway. Okay, and then we're going to let this sit for 24 hours. In the meantime, we can begin to reassemble the gears into the back plate of the clock. Now we're going to reassemble the gears into the back plate. The first step is you need to lubricate the teeth on the gears, and what you want to get is a synthetic clock oil. It's available on Amazon, and you just need to put a few drops of it around each tooth of the gear, the inside ones and around the perimeter as well. I've already done this to all the gears, so we will put everything back together. The first step is to remove this spring clip from around the plate. And we're going to assemble the gears in the reverse order that we took them out. 1, 2. If you recall, these two were stuck together like a sandwich. You can slide it in from the side. And then finally the last one. And now the gears are set up the way they were when we first started. The next step is to attach the front plate to the back plate. If you turn it over, it has a circular disc that rotates on here, and the holes need to be matched with the holes on the front so that it can fit over the back plate. So I put a bit of blue painter's tape to line it up properly so that it doesn't move around when I fit it over it. Don't forget to replace the spring that we took off from the starter knob. It takes a bit of teasing to get this on. Once you get it in, with your fingers, you can sort of push the gears into position to make sure they're all fitting properly. And once it's down, you'll tighten everything up with the 4 nuts. I'm going to play around with this on my own a little bit, and then we'll come back. The base plate is back on. It's secured with the 4 nuts. If you look at it sideways to how the gears line up, it should be in the same positioning as it was when we first started. The next step is to remove the blue tape. And we can replace the spring clip and if you want to be certain that everything is put together properly, you can temporarily put the set knob back on and then just seat the minute hand. And if everything's put together right, it should turn. And there you go. So the gears are lined up correctly. Now we have to drain the 3-in-1 oil from the rotor that's been soaking for the past 24 hours. Again, it takes several minutes to shake it all out. Once it's all out, we're then going to seat it upside down and let it totally drain on its own for another 24 hours. The rotor has been draining now for 24 hours, and we have to reseal it by soldering the little plug back into it. I have placed it in a clamp because when you solder this, it gets kind of hot to hold. So first, position the little plug. Okay. And then we solder. And there you go. Let that cool for a little bit. Now we reattach the rotor. Replace the gasket and seat the rotor. Now we install the clock dial. Put it on, flip it over. And with a screwdriver, you're going to re-bend the little clips on the corners that secured it in the first place. Now we synchronize the calendar. Temporarily place the time set knob back on and then start turning it until you see the day and the date change to the next one. Once it's changed, you place the minute hand back on the clock. And then you want to turn the knob so it's pointing to the 12th. And then remove the minute hand. Then place the hour hand pointing to 2. Then the minute hand can go back on. And you've just synchronized the clock to 2 a.m., which is approximately when the day and the date change each day. What I've done next is place the nut that holds the minute hand back on, tighten it with a pair of pliers. Now we place the second hand. And lastly, for this, make sure to remove the time set knob. Now we put the clock back into the frame. We start with the glass first. Place the glass in, then the clock. And what we'll do next is to reattach the wires. I have the electric cord going through the back plate and put a knot in it, so if it gets pulled hard, it won't pull it away from the connections that we're making. So to attach the wires, you twist them together. And we're going to use a wire nut. There's one. Okay. Next, we reattach the back plate. Position the wires inside. And then the 4 screws. I will tighten them up. Next, reattach the data plate. And then we reattach the set knob. And you need to clamp it with a vice grip. And get it nice and tight. That way, whichever way you turn it, the hands will move instead of it unscrewing itself. Now we're ready to plug it in. And if we've done everything correctly, you give the start knob a spin, and it should continue on its own. And there you go. The last thing I want to leave you with is that when I first started to try to restore these clocks, I really had no idea what I was doing. I looked for some videos to get some tips and advice on how to do it and found that there really weren't any which is why I decided to try to make this video. But what I did find, however, was a very good book on how to maintain and repair Hammond clocks. This is the book. It's by Craig Shields. You can get this on Amazon. All the steps that I've outlined in this video are all in here with a lot more information. It's well worth the money. And that wraps it up. One thing I forgot to mention is how to set the day and the date. If you turn the clock over, you can see the mechanisms that control both and an arrow showing you which way to rotate them. If you turn it the wrong way, you can damage the mechanism. What you want to do is turn it to yesterday and then forward the time until you see the day and the date change. Once it changes, now it's today at about 2:15 in the morning, and you just continue to go to whatever time it is and you're set.